Hail and well met, fellow adventurers. Welcome back to another deck tech with too many cards and dice. I'm your host, Ben, and today we're going to be talking about Heartless Hidetsugu. And this was the very first commander deck that I ever built way back when, after encountering it at a local game store and borrowing a deck and seeing that it was a format full of non-basic lands and really expensive cards that I didn't own. This is back before the first round of pre-made commander decks were even published. So the following week I came back with this deck because I thought, what a great way to knock everyone down to 20 out of 21 life. And everybody was suitably terrified until they learned, or until a wiser person pointed out that it had to be combat damage, not any damage dealt by a commander. And while I was just a touch disappointed, I was not too disappointed, and I don't recall the outcome of that game. But anyhow, Heartless Hidetsugu is a 4/3 Ogre Shaman for red 3, and you tap him, and he deals to each player, to include yourself, damage equal to half that player's life total rounded down. Now, there are a few things. This is the 5th or 6th time that I have built this deck, and I say that because I periodically tear it down to make use of parts in other decks. I love mono red, but I don't want to keep going out and getting snow-covered mountains and all the other bits and pieces that make a mono red deck work for me. So I just keep one mono deck existent by using at least half of it in every single deck. Anyhow, there's a few things I've learned over the years, the decade plus of running this guy. And the first thing is that you need to mitigate all that damage that you're dealing to yourself. And so I've got what I currently use. Excuse me. I have Basilisk Collar and Batterbone, two lovely pieces of equipment that are chiefly here to provide lifelink. So yeah, I'm dealing damage, but I'm gaining life for it. I used to use Loxodon on Warhammer, but it costs a bit much to use and equip compared to these. That said, that equip cost 5s. That may change my mind. Regardless, if I owned Shadow Spear, it would be in here, but that card is currently beyond my budget, and I just don't do proxies. So anyhow, lifelink. And along with these two for lifelink, I also have Witch's Clinic, which is a lovely land, gives me colorless, or I can give target commander lifelink until end of turn. Ooh, so I could give it to somebody else, which I won't do in this deck, but I got another deck where I might. Anyhow, so lifelink is one way to mitigate all that damage that you're dealing. Another way is to run Fortune Thief. It costs 5 to cast, but damage that would reduce your life total to less than 1 reduces it to 1 instead. I never do anything with Morph with this. I just play it expressly to hopefully save myself, or at least eat removal. And then my last trick is the most popular one. Glacial Chasm. This land is a great land for all sorts of shenanigans. Cumulative upkeep, 2 life. So that means you're paying 2 life, then 4, then 6, then 8. So at some point, you gotta get rid of this. But anyhow, when it enters the battlefield, sack a land, you cannot attack. All damage dealt to you is reduced to 0. From experience, do not play this until your commander is online. All right. The other notable thing with Heartless Hidetsugu dealing damage equal to half is that half plus half equals a whole. So anybody with an even life total can possibly die if you run damage doublers, of which I have 6 in here. Everybody's favorite Costs 4, and it's Sulfime, Mayhem Dominus. For red 2. Legendary Phyrexian Horror, 5/4 there. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to an opponent, or permanent an opponent controls, it deals double that damage instead. And of course I can discard 2 cards and make it indestructible. And I gotta tell you, you want this to be indestructible. So this is the first one. So if my opponents are sitting happy at 40 life, I run out Heartless Hidetsugu and tap it. They take 20 damage from Heartless and then another 20. 20 plus 20 is 40. You win. Other options include Furnace of Wrath. Also comes in at 4. But this is anybody's damage from anything to anything or anyone. This can be a dangerous play. Also a dangerous play for 5 mana, because, you know, flash. It's just the same as Furnace of Wrath. Anybody's source dealing damage to anything, it doubles it. Then I have Gratuitous Violence, the old art. If a creature you control would deal damage. So it's only my stuff dealing damage, which is lovely. And Heartless Hidetsugu and a couple other things in here are damage dealing creatures. All right, I got lucky and pulled this out of a pack of foundations, so of course it's in here. And this dragon is Twin Flame Tyrant. If a source you control would deal damage to an opponent or permanent, it deals double that damage instead. And lastly, for 6 mana, I've got Fiendish Duo. Red 4 for a 5/5 first striking devil. And the way this one is read, it's anybody dealing damage to any opponent, which is really kind of clever. Anyhow, so I've got the basic tricks. If you're building Heartless Hidetsugu, you want damage doublers, you want ways to mitigate the damage. But to be fair, since it's a tap ability and he does not have haste, a smart table will not let it get back around to your turn to tap it. Which means you need to have haste enablers in this deck. And this version of the deck has many. So let's get started. I have 3 lands, and this is the best of them. Hall of the Bandit Lord. Excuse me. Enters play tapped, and then you tap it and pay 3 life for 1 colorless, and if it's spent on a creature spell, the creature has haste. You can pay it on something else, and it just, the haste thing that goes away. But look, paying 3 life almost guarantees that you go from having an even life total to an odd life total. So you would survive the damage doubling Heartless Hidetsugu nonsense that this deck tries to pull off. I also have Flamekin Village. When it enters, I may reveal an elemental card from my hand. And if you don't, it enters play tapped. I don't believe there's any elementals in this deck, so this one will come into play tapped. And you can tap it for red or red and it to give a critter haste till end of turn. And my last land is Arena of Glory. Enters tapped unless you control a mountain, which this deck is full of. You can tap it for red or red and exert it, and you get red. And then the creatures used for it get haste. Excuse me. And the fine print there, exerting, means it doesn't untap next turn. But I have other ways to get haste. I have Crimson Wisps. Turns red, draw a card, get haste. Lovely instant. I believe all the other ones, yes, all the other ones are permanents. I have Lava Spur Boots. I love this card. I don't care that the creature gets +1/+0, but I do like haste and ward 1. And the cost is wonderful. 1 to cast, 1 to equip. Boots of Speed. +1/+0 and haste. Haste is what I want. Lovely cost. Speaking of boots, you're not surprised to see Swiftfoot Boots. And this doubles as protection. I've got Greaves in here too, Lightning Greaves, for more protection. But really haste. Now this might be my favorite haste generating card in the deck. And I say that because ideally this is in your opening hand with at least 3 lands. Anyhow, this is a Generator Servant. He costs red 1 to cast. He's an elemental. Anyhow, he's a 2/1, but that doesn't matter because you are going to tap and sack it to add 2 to your mana pool. And if that mana is spent on a creature, which it should be, it gains haste until end of turn. So I have actually done this a couple times through the years. This enables a turn 3 Heartless Hidetsugu who gets to go off, boom, before anybody can really do anything. I love this card. Ring of Valkis. Costs 2 to cast, 1 to equip. The creature has haste. However, if the creature's red, it gets a +1/+1 counter. That's just bonus. Battle Mage Bracers. This costs red 2 to cast. The critter has haste. And whenever an ability of equipped creature is activated, if it is not a mana ability, you may pay 1. And if you do, copy that ability. And you can always choose new targets for it. And I'm not 100% certain, but I'm fairly certain that that means I could go twice with this. So in a weird way, I do believe Battle Mage's Bracers is a weird doubler. All right, Hammer of Perforos, red 1. Creatures have haste, and in a pinch, I can tap 3 in it and sack a land and make golems. I've never done that. The reason this is in here instead of Fervor, which also costs 3 but just gives haste, is because I want the devotion, and you'll see why in a bit. 1,000-Year Elixir. Technically, this 3-drop artifact does not give haste, but you can use the abilities like haste. The fact that it untaps a creature is bonus. Anger. Costs 4 to cast. It has haste. It's a 2/2 incarnation. But really, you want to pitch this or otherwise get it into the graveyard as soon as possible. Excuse me. Ogre Battle Driver. 2/2 red 3/3 Ogre Warrior. Other creatures entering get haste and +2/+0. The commander doesn't care about that +2 part, but actually I've got other cards that do, so it kind of works out. Enduring Courage. Look, this whole enduring cycle is really cool, but this is the one I need for the deck. And it's basically Ogre Battle Driver, except when it dies, if it's a creature, it comes back as an enchantment. So it's like having 2 haste cards in one. And lastly, my most expensive haste maker is Urabrask the Hidden. This Praetor costs red 3. He gives my guys haste, and my opponent's creatures enter the battlefield tapped. And he's a 4/4. So there you have it. Lots and lots of haste. But let's talk about the other cards, because we're not relying on what we have top decked. We rely on other things. So let's look at the other things. How am I damaging folks when I can't get my commander to do his thing? Well, first off, I've got Valakut the Molten Pinnacle in here. Enters the play tapped, doesn't matter. And then when mountains enter the battlefield under your control, if I have at least 5 other mountains, and I do, this will deal 3 damage to target creature or player. And with the doublers, you're looking at 6 or more. I also broke down and bought a Bolt Wave. I checked on Facebook. I was curious, why is it the cost it is, which is, I paid $6 for it. And it turns out that pretty much every format wants this. And there's a couple commander decks in specific that it makes ridiculous. But if you somehow have not seen Bolt Wave, you pay red to deal 3 damage to each opponent. And with these doublers in here, or if your deck uses triplers, which I don't, It's super ridiculous. Price of progress. I'm not blowing up anybody's lands with this deck. Well, let me back that up. I'm not mass destruction. But I am punishing them. 2 damage to each player for each non-basic land they control. I have its bigger brother, Sunspine Lynx, who also players cannot gain life and damage cannot be prevented. So this, be careful with this because this shuts off most of your save yourself tricks. When it enters, it deals damage to each player equal to the number of non-basic lands they control. And it's a 5/4 elemental. So maybe this is turning into an elemental deck. But to round things off for non-basic land punishment, we have Burning Earth. Whenever any player taps a non-basic land for mana, they take 1 damage. So this will slow folks down without actually killing their stuff. All right. Fanatic of Mogus is a pet card of mine. It costs red and 3 to cast. It's a 4/2 Minotaur Shaman. When he enters the battlefield, it deals damage to each opponent equal to your devotion to red. Now, I don't know if you were paying close attention to all those damage doubling enchantments and several of my haste makers. I mean, it's the casting costs are red, red, and red, red, red. And I've got other things in here with the higher red count. Such a great card. And odds are good it'll come in with haste, so I can then squeeze in another 4 damage because I can. Definitely a pet card. Brashed Haunter. Red and 4 for a 1/1 indestructible goblin. And he redirects damage, and he fights a target creature. And as a bonus, I could put that Basilisk collar on him, and then he just kills stuff left and right. And the way the damage doubling works, depending on the damage doubler, you can almost get 4 times as much damage. Because he gets hit, which is doubled, and then he hits somebody else for that much, which is then doubled. Lots and lots of fun. And then my last big mass damage dealer is Red Dragon. Also a pet card, not going to lie. You get a 4/4 flying dragon for red, red 4. And when he enters, he deals 4 damage to each opponent. Plays super nice with my haste makers. Plays super nice with my damage doublers. But those are the ways I make everyone's life difficult to make this a burn deck. I've got removal, of course. I have Ye Old Lightning Bolt. Instant 3 damage to anything is how the erratas work. So I could conceivably hit planeswalkers. I have Incinerate, which is a slightly worse lightning bolt because it costs 1 extra. And honestly, I love this art. So this is a borderline pet card because there's objectively better removal out there, but I like this art. All right, Final Fortune. This is, it's not really removal. I shouldn't call this topic that. This is my miscellaneous batch. Red, red, instant, take another turn, and you lose the game at the end of that turn. I've played so many games over the years where I need just 1 more turn. And all the red extra turn cards are worded this way. Final Fortune is the one I own, so that's the one that's in here. Molten Influence. Red and 1. Instant. This obscure instant counters target instant or sorcery unless its controller has Molten Influence, deal 4 damage to him or her. As you might imagine, this plays super well with damage doublers and makes this marginal card suddenly not too bad. You're still giving an opponent a choice, yes. However, it should be a more difficult choice as the game progresses. Chaos Warp with the awesome Phil Foglio art. I don't even know how I ended up with this card, probably through trade. Anyhow, we all know what Chaos Warp does. Glacial Crevices. The main reason that I run this with Snow Mountains. This enchantment from Ice Age costs 2 and a red. And I can sack a Snow Mountain And no creatures deal combat damage this turn. So it's basically a fog as long as I have lands in play. Or, sorry, snow-covered mountains in play. Silent Arbiter. He's a decent blocker as a 1/5 for 4. And he reduces combat to 1 attacker and 1 blocker each turn. So it stalls, makes me happy. Now we get some Naked Destruction coming up. Good old Vandal Blast. I've seen it played for 1 to kill an emergency thing, but mostly it gets played for the overload cost. Destroy every artifact I do not own. Structural Assault. It's kind of a pet removal card for me. Red, 3. Destroy all artifacts, then deal damage to each creature equal to the number of artifacts that were put into graveyards from the battlefield this turn. So that means if you cast this and your opponents sacrifice all their treasures in response, it doesn't matter. It counts those treasures. And yes, tokens stop by the graveyard on their way out of existence. Anyhow, I love this for 5. There's my land destruction. Volcanic Offering. If you're running red, you should consider picking up this instant. Anyhow, it costs red 4 to cast. It's got pretty groovy art. Destroy target non-basic land you do not control and target non-basic land of an opponent's choice that you do not control. It also deals 7 damage to target creature you don't control and 7 damage to target creature of an opponent's choice that you don't control. So basically, you're getting 2 lands and probably 2 creatures out of this. And on rare occasions, the situation is such that an opponent is forced to pick their own non-basic land or creature. And in those occasions, it is hilarious. All right, Chain Reaction. Deal X damage to each creature, where X is the number of creatures on the battlefield. Blasphemous Act. You know it and you love it. 13 damage, and it's probably going to be reduced to a whole lot less than 9 mana to cast. All right, I've got a lot of cool cards in here, and you might be wondering, well, what does your draw look like? How do you make sure that you get these cool cards in your hand? I got a couple options here. One, with all the snow lands, I use scrying sheets. So it's very slow, and it doesn't work all the time because not everything is snow, but it's an option. Next up is War Room. This is beautiful in monocolored decks like red. And look, pay life equal to the number of colors. So 1. So this is another way to reduce your life and make it an odd total so that you don't die to your own shenanigans. Skull Clamp. You know it and you love it. Equipped creature gets +1/-1, and when it dies, when it's put into a graveyard, so exile gets around that. Draw 2 cards. Endless Atlas. Another lovely card from monocolor decks. Draw a card, activate this ability only if you control 3 or more lands with the same name. You know, like Snow-Covered Mountain. I got lucky, and I pulled this. Demand Answers, so I jammed it in here. Instant. Then as an additional cost, I either discard or sack an artifact to draw 2 cards. With this deck, I've only got 1 artifact truly worth sacrificing, and that would be Solemn Simulacrum, and you'll see him in a hot minute. But I do have a couple things that are fun to discard. All right, the next 2 cards are kind of like Molten Influence in that they give an opponent a choice. And normally it's a terrible choice because your opponent always picks what won't help you. But both of them involve dealing damage or letting me draw cards. But with damage doublers in play, the choice becomes a lot more difficult, and you end up with cards more often than not. Anyhow, Browbeat is any player can take 5 damage, and if no one does, a target player draws 3 cards, and it's me that draws the 3 cards, folks. Risk Factor, though, is an instant, and it's target opponent. So this one is more likely to go in your favor. And it's only 4 damage, and if that player doesn't, I must draw 3 cards. And it has Jumpstart, so I can play it again. And my last bit of draw plays really nice and is hysterical if Heartless Hidetsugu goes off and you get even 10 damage dealt with it to somebody, but probably more. And it's Null Spine Dragon. And yeah, he costs a whopping 7 to cast at red, 5. 7/5 flyer. It's pretty funny with haste, though. Anyhow, when he comes into play, you may discard your hand and draw cards equal to the damage dealt to target opponent this turn. Yeah, I'll discard 2 or 3 cards to draw 20, which I have done, and it's lovely. All right, but to enable things, especially Skull Clamp, but also the discarding, I've got good old Squee, Goblin Nabob. His casting cost is red 2, and he's a 1/1. That doesn't matter because at the beginning of your upkeep, you may return him from your graveyard to your hand. Great Skull Clamp fodder, great discard fodder, and he keeps coming back for more. So does his buddy, Squee the Immortal. You may cast him from your graveyard or from exile. And he's got that lovely little devotion count. He's a little tougher, but he still wears Skull Clamp like a champ. Krenko Mob Boss. I would never put Skull Clamp on him, and he's never going to make me a big stack of goblins, but he'll make just enough to Skull Clamp my way to victory, or to block, or an occasion attack. So, and he plays super well with the haste, so you get at least a couple goblins out of him. And then lastly, Care Keep. Yeah, it gives you colorless, but really, it makes 0/1 tokens that also like to wear Skull Clamp. Now, before I get to the lands themselves, this is how I do mana. Sol Ring, you expected it. Cold Steel Heart, it's a snow artifact. Enters play tapped. When it enters, choose a color, red. And then it's just your typical red making rock, but it's snow, so it's in here. Ruby Medallion. Fire Diamond, enters play tapped. All right, Expedition Map. You sack it, search your library for any land, and in my case, it's typically Glacial Chasm. Ain't gonna lie. Reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle the library. Solemn Simulacrum. Sad Robot. Anyhow, 2/2, enters play, search up a basic land, and then when he dies, draw a card. I gotta tell you, this art stems from the fact that the person in the art won a tournament. And this is how things used to be, and I wish they would go back to it. There used to be in Magic certain tournaments that if you won, the big prize, aside from cash, was you got to design a card, and then your face was incorporated into the art. Avalanche Riders, I think Sylvan Safekeeper, Shadow Mage Infiltrator, and several others through the years came about because of that. And I think it's a wonderful incentive. So bring that back, Wizards of the Coast. Treasonous Ogre. I'm not worried about the dethrone of this ogre. I do like pay 3 life, add a red mana. This again reduces your life to an odd amount most of the time. Defiler of Instinct. I like the whole Defiler series. They're similar. Anyhow, this one costs red 2, Phyrexian Kevu. First strike, 4/4, don't care. What I do care about is this. As an additional cost to cast a red permanent spells, you may pay 2 life, and then those spells cost a red less to cast if you paid life this way. This effect reduces only the amount of red mana you pay. And whenever you cast a red permanent, he deals 1 damage to any target. He's mostly in here for the mana option. However, dealing damage is nice too. Then we got Mana Geyser, because why not? And then Neheb the Eternal, which is another popular trick with Heartless Hidetsugu. Beginning of your post-combat main phase, add red to your mana pool for each 1 life your opponents have lost this turn. Damage counts. So if I tap and everybody loses 20, I get 60 mana. It's a very ridiculous card. And probably the only drawback to this whole deck is I am not running any X spells to take full advantage of that. But whatever, mana burn's gone, so I'm not too concerned about that. All right, let's look at our non-basic lands. Scavenger Grounds. Take care of those naughty, naughty graveyards. Buried Ruin. I got a couple artifacts that I really like and want to bring back. Myriad Landscape. It'll fetch snow-covered mountains quite nicely. And everything else in here is a snow-covered mountain. So, there you have it, folks. Heartless Hidetsugu. My attempt at, or my latest attempt, I should say, at burning people out in a commander game. For those that care, because of Glacial Chasm, this is a bracket number 4, which is ridiculous. But whatever. The, oh, I forgot what I was going to say. Nope. The deck list should be down in the description. Hit like and subscribe if you like this. If you have any other preferred Heartless Hidetsugu tricks, by all means, let me know in the comments. And that's all I have. I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks.